A raccoon in a backyard in Ohio watches a man take the trash out every Tuesday at 7. It does not react to the trash. It watches his hands, his pace, the way he glances at the fence before he turns back inside. Somewhere in that raccoon's skull is a running file on this one human, updated week after week, cross-checked against every other person who has ever crossed that yard. Every gesture logged whether the raccoon knows it's logging anything or not. That file has almost nothing to do with what people usually mean when they say an animal fears humans. It has everything to do with a question the raccoon has been asking since before its eyes opened. Which humans are dangerous, and which ones are just weather passing through? Most of us assume wild animals see us the way a smoke detector sees smoke. One category, one response. Human equals threat, or human equals nothing at all. For a long time, even the scientists studying these animals mostly worked from that assumption, treating human presence as a single variable in their data sheets. Then, a handful of researchers started watching specific animals in specific places closely enough to notice something that didn't fit, and the tidy picture came apart in their hands. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Start with the crows. In the early 2000s, the wildlife biologist John Marsluff and his team at the University of Washington put on rubber caveman masks and trapped wild crows on campus, then released them unharmed. Simple enough. What happened next wasn't. Weeks later, crows that had never been touched by a researcher were mobbing anyone wearing that same mask, screeching and diving at them from the trees. The birds had watched the trapping from a distance, memorized a face they'd never even had contact with, and passed the warning to crows who hadn't been born yet when the original trapping happened. Marsluff's team kept tracking the campus for years afterward, and some of those crows were still scolding the mask more than a decade later, in a population that had mostly turned over. The birds doing the scolding had never seen a trap in their lives. They inherited the grudge the way you might inherit a family story about someone who wronged your grandfather, complete with the same suspicion attached to the same face. Mockingbirds do something almost identical, and the biologist Doug Levy documented it on a university quad in Florida. His team approached nests wearing different shirts on different days, sometimes just standing near the nest, never touching it. The birds ignored most of the people who walked past all day long, but the specific person who had approached their nest, wearing the exact clothes from that encounter, got dive-bombed on site days later. Swap the shirt, and the bird calmed down again. It wasn't tracking a species. It was tracking an outfit attached to a memory, attached to a threat, filed under one individual and nobody else, with a precision that would embarrass most eyewitnesses in a courtroom. Elephants take it even further. The biologist Karen McComb ran playback experiments in Amboseli National Park in Kenya, using recordings of human voices speaking the same simple phrase in different languages. Elephant families that heard the voice of a Maasai man, a group with a long history of occasionally spearing elephants over grazing conflicts, bunched together defensively and moved away almost immediately. The same families barely reacted to the voice of a Kamba man, a group with no comparable history of conflict with elephants in that region. The animals weren't responding to humanity in general. They were sorting one ethnic group from another by the sound of a sentence, based on generations of accumulated risk that had nothing to do with the individual speaker standing in front of them that day. McComb's team even tested whether the elephants were reacting to pitch alone, and found the animals could tell the difference between adult and child voices too, calming down noticeably when the recording sounded young, because a child posed less of a threat than a grown man with a spear. Dogs complicate the picture in the opposite direction, and that's worth sitting with for a second. A dog that has spent its whole life around gentle owners will often greet a stranger with the same loose, open body language it uses for its own family, something almost no wild animal ever risks. That isn't proof dogs lack the sorting instinct other animals have. Any dog that's been kicked by a stranger once will flinch at a raised hand for the rest of its life, proof the machinery is still there, just tuned differently. It's proof of how completely thousands of years of selection can rewrite the default setting, breeding animals whose baseline forecast about humans starts from safety instead of caution. Wild animals never got that luxury. Every fox, every crow, every raccoon still runs the calculation from scratch, because for them the cost of guessing wrong even once can be the last guess they ever make. A dog that misjudges a stranger might get a scolding. A deer that misjudges a stranger might not get a second chance to learn from the mistake at all. Here's the concept researchers use to measure all of this, and it sounds clinical until you realize how much is packed inside it. Flight initiation distance. It's simply how close something can get before an animal bolts. What makes it interesting isn't the measurement itself, it's that the number moves. The same squirrel in the same park will let a jogger pass within a few feet without flinching, then bolt from someone walking slowly toward it from 30 feet away. Predictable, fast-moving, forward-facing humans read as background noise. Someone slow, someone who lingers, someone whose path keeps bending toward the animal, reads as a decision being made. The animal isn't measuring your intentions, it's measuring your pattern against every pattern it has already survived. Stretch that across an entire neighborhood, and something bigger starts to take shape. To a fox living behind a row of houses, or a pigeon working a train platform, or a coyote that has learned exactly which alleys empty their bins on Thursdays, a human being isn't a category. It's closer to a character in a story the animal has been reading its whole life, one appearance at a time. There's the one who tosses bread from the same bench every afternoon, and something in the animal's body eases the moment that shape appears. There's the one who threw a rock once, 3 years ago, and the wariness never fully wore off even though the rock never came again. Cities don't just house animals, they train them, the same way any environment with rules and repetition trains anything living in it. A pigeon working a subway platform in New York learns the exact 10 seconds after a train empties when dropped food is most likely, and it learns which commuters walk the aisle glancing down and which ones never look at the ground at all. Coyotes that have moved into cities like Chicago have been observed doing something that looks almost absurd on paper. They wait at intersections for the walk signal, crossing when the flow of pedestrians crosses, and holding back when the cars have the light. Nobody trained them to do that. They learned it by watching the same pattern repeat itself hundreds of times, the same way a person picks up the rhythm of a subway system after a few weeks in a new city. None of that requires the coyote to understand traffic laws. It only requires the same skill the pigeon and the raccoon already have, the ability to notice that certain human behaviors are reliable enough to plan around. It gets even more granular than that. Researchers studying urban gulls have found individual birds that learn to target specific people carrying specific bags from specific shops, ignoring everyone else entirely, because that one shape has meant food before and the others haven't. A single gull on a boardwalk isn't watching the crowd. It's watching for one silhouette in a sea of them, the way you'd scan a station platform for a face you're expecting. Multiply that by every bench, every alley, every crosswalk and loading dock in a city, and you get an animal population quietly holding an enormous, unspoken map of who among us can be trusted, and when, and for how long. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. So trust, from the animal's side, isn't really trust the way we use the word. When we say it about each other, it comes loaded with warmth, loyalty, the sense of something earned over time and capable of being betrayed. Strip that framing away, and what's left is closer to a forecast, a prediction the nervous system runs constantly, mostly below the level of anything you'd call thought. Based on everything that's happened before, what does this shape do next? You run the same calculation on a quiet street without noticing you're doing it. Distance, speed, where the eyes are pointed, whether the person's path lines up with yours by accident or on purpose. You decide before any conscious thought finishes forming, and underneath all of it sits a question so old it doesn't need language. Is this thing going to hurt me? An animal reading a human across a parking lot is running the identical question, just without the vocabulary. And this is where it gets stranger, because the calculation an animal makes about a stranger it has never met turns out to be older and heavier than anything one encounter could teach it. A crow that has never been trapped still flinches at certain human behaviors it has never personally experienced. A deer that has never been shot at still goes still at the particular silhouette of a person standing with something long and straight held against their shoulder. Some of what animals know about us was never learned in one lifetime. It was inherited, the way a fear of falling doesn't need to be taught to a baby. That inheritance goes back further than most people would guess, and further than feels comfortable. In 2017, the ecologist Justine Smith ran an experiment in California that still unsettles people who hear about it for the first time. Her team rigged hidden speakers near fresh mountain lion kills, the carcasses of deer the cats had just spent enormous energy taking down, and played different sounds across the clearing. Some nights it was the harmless calls of frogs and other wildlife. Other nights it was ordinary human conversation, nothing aggressive, no yelling, just people talking the way you'd talk to a friend over dinner. The lions ran from the human voices more than 80% of the time, abandoning kills they would fight another lion to the death over. They came back later, fed less, and stayed jumpier for the rest of the night. A predator, capable of killing an elk on its own, was more frightened of two people chatting than of almost anything else sharing its mountains. That fear didn't come from nowhere, and it didn't come from watching us run. It came from watching us hunt. For most of the time modern humans have existed, we weren't cowering prey animals hiding from claws in the dark. We were, by the numbers, the most dangerous predators the planet had ever produced. In 2015, the biologist Chris Darrimont published research showing that humans kill large carnivores, the bears, wolves, and big cats, at roughly 9 times the rate those animals kill each other. Coordinated, patient, willing to throw a weapon from a distance no claw or fang could close. Darrimont's team compared us against every major predator on record and found nothing else close. Wolves are efficient killers of other predators occasionally, but nothing hunts the hunters the way we do, methodically, across every continent, for tens of thousands of years running. Somewhere in that history, cave lions and giant short-faced bears and other predators that had ruled entire continents for hundreds of thousands of years went extinct, and modern humans were standing over what was left. The exceptions prove how deep that caution runs. In 1898, 2 lions near the Tsavo River in Kenya killed a string of railway workers over several months, an episode that became famous precisely because it broke the pattern so badly, spawning books and films that still get the story slightly wrong. When researchers examined the skulls of those lions more than a century later, they found one of the animals had a severely damaged, abscessed jaw, the kind of injury that would make chasing anything fast or dangerous nearly impossible. It hadn't chosen humans as easy prey out of appetite. It had run out of every other option a healthy predator would have preferred. A wolf, a bear, a big cat that stays healthy almost never makes that trade, because the risk math never favors it. Every large predator alive today descends from the ones who avoided that gamble entirely, who learned generation after generation to read a circle of firelight as something to walk away from rather than something to test. Which brings the whole thing back to the raccoon by the trash cans, the crow that remembers a mask it never personally met, the elephant that sorts one language from another, and the mockingbird that clocks a shirt. None of them are thinking about ancient predators or Pleistocene extinctions. But the wariness those events built didn't disappear just because the danger mostly did. It got folded into instinct, passed down as a kind of default setting, then layered over with everything each individual animal learns firsthand about the specific humans in its specific patch of the world. The old inherited caution says, approach carefully. The new, personal memory says, this one throws things, or this one is safe, or this one is the reason the bin lid stays open on Tuesdays. Both are running at once, all the time, in the mind of anything wild enough to still need the answer. What that means is unsettling if you sit with it for more than a few seconds. Every time an animal looks at you, it isn't seeing a person. It's running a quiet, layered audit, weighing something ancient it never had to learn against something recent it learned entirely on its own, just from watching you. The fox that freezes when you step outside at night isn't afraid of you specifically. It's afraid of what your species has been capable of for longer than either of you has existed, filtered through whatever it has personally clocked about how you, this particular human, tend to behave. The crow that lands calmly on a fence you're standing near has made a judgment call about you that took longer to build than your entire relationship with that bird, because it started before either of you were born. There's a strange kind of intimacy hiding inside that, one most people never notice, because it runs in a direction we're not used to looking. We spend so much energy wondering whether animals are conscious, whether they feel things the way we do, whether there's anything going on behind those eyes. Meanwhile, they've been quietly building profiles on us the whole time, sorting us into categories with more precision than we usually extend to each other. The bird outside your window might already know your schedule better than your coworkers do. It knows what time your car leaves and what time it comes back, whether you slam the door or ease it shut, whether the dog that walks beside you strains at the leash or trots along calm, whether you're the kind of person who slows down near the nest in the hedge or the kind who never notices it's there at all. Most of that surveillance runs both ways, without either side realizing it. You've probably done a version of the same sorting yourself without calling it that. The dog on your street you no longer flinch at, the one you cross to avoid, the crow that always seems to be watching you specifically from the same wire. You built those judgments the same way the animals build theirs, from repetition, from small pieces of evidence stacked one on top of another until they hardened into something that felt like knowledge. The only real difference is that you have language for it, and the crow just has memory. The next time something wild goes still and watches you pass, it isn't empty of thought. It's finishing a calculation that started long before you walked into frame, one that weighs the whole history of your kind against the small, specific evidence of exactly who you've shown yourself to be. Somewhere between the fear your ancestors earned and the person you happen to be on any given Tuesday, the animal makes its decision, and it makes it faster than you'll ever notice it happening. Think about what that means for the ordinary, forgettable version of you, the one who takes out the trash, waits at the crosswalk, walks the same route to work 5 days a week, without a single thought about who might be cataloging it. Somewhere along that route, something is watching, and it has already decided what kind of human you are. Not from anything you said, not from anything you'd think to explain if it could ask, just from the pattern of you, repeated often enough to become a fact. You'll never see the file. You'll never know which category you landed in, but it exists, updated in real time, every single day you step outside, and something wild happens to be watching, quietly deciding whether the oldest fear its kind ever learned still applies to you, or whether you're the rare shape in the grass that turned out to be safe. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.